You're listening to the Kelly Green Hour for the Always Next Year Podcast Studio Network. You can find the team on our Twitter, @ANYPodcast, or visit us on our website, www.alwaysnextyearpodcast.com. And now, to bring us in, the Jackdaws.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and so jig over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still have me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Kelly Green Hour here on the Always Next Year podcast. As we are here on a victory green hour, and it's a Friday afternoon as the Philadelphia Eagles come storming back from 10 down to defeat the Green Bay Packers 34-27. I'm your host, LJ Harrell, and joining me today, as always, is Connor Donald. Connor, how you feeling today?
A lot better than I was feeling last night, I'll tell you that.
I'm feeling a lot better than I was on Sunday, that's for damn sure.
It was good, though. It's good. I'm feeling great. The Eagles won. Of course, the way that vaunted pick segment goes, we pick against the Eagles and they win. I feel like I'm just going to pick against the Eagles for the rest of the season. If it means we're getting a win, damn.
I was just about to say that. We might have to buck trend there. We might just have to we're obviously rooting for the Eagles to win, but we'll pick against them if it means if we get to play reverse psychology. As Carson Wentz said yesterday after the game, 2-2 feels a hell of a lot better than 1-3. And just our feelings after the game. Could you imagine what today would have been like if they would have lost that game and they're sitting 1-3 with a possibility of going 3 back in the division if Dallas were to beat the Saints on Sunday night? But
we would probably be like Green Bay Packers Twitter right now, just trying to pick apart that final play. I think Green Bay Packers fans have to look back and say, you guys were on the doorstep twice.
Yeah.
Twice, and you got their fourth down twice.
And you know how many times they ran the ball? 0.
Would you have ran the ball if you were Matt LaFleur on that?
I would have ran at least once. Just to shut the fans up and probably see a loss of 2 or 3 yards because Aaron Jones could not do shit. Their leading rusher was Aaron Rodgers. It's not even to shut the fans up. It's to kind of have the Eagles defense respect that you're actually going to run the football. You never know. Like if you you're on the 1 yard line. If you can, most running backs, not most, but some running backs can just fall forward into the end zone. Like just do it once and then you could throw. I mean, I get it. Aaron Rodgers is an all-time type of quarterback and you obviously want the ball in his hands. But you have to you have to at least run the football once, not throw the ball. It's the first time in Aaron Rodgers' career, I think, that he's had 4 straight incompletions from inside from like the 1 or 2 yard line, I think is the stat.
It was also the first, if I'm not mistaken, I read a stat. It was his first interception playing 3 yards with less than 3 yards of field ever.
And the interception, which came with 20 some odd seconds left, was the latest interception in regulation that he's ever thrown.
Everyone was like, Aaron Rodgers, right before the half, everyone was like, Aaron Rodgers in 2 minutes is like the world's deadliest combination. Well,
I mean, you saw what he did before the half. That was ridiculous. He went down the field in 50 seconds.
You basically saw what he could do. And then we also saw the very rare occasion of Aaron Rodgers failing with less than 2 minutes left and short yardage to go.
And the play, that last play, I mean, we're going to go through this. We'll go through it a little bit. But that last play that was intercepted by Nigel Bradham, who, by the way, should have had 2 interceptions, one of which would have been returned for a touchdown. That last play was reminiscent of the Patriots-Seahawks Super Bowl. It was the Malcolm Butler interception.
So many people comparing him, and like everyone was like, Matt LaFleur just Pete Carrolled that 2 possessions. He Pete Carrolled it basically. I think it's got to be, you got to sit there and say, like, this is a blessing in disguise that Devontae Adams was not out there. Because you heard the stats. He is a deadly red zone threat.
He was killing us. He had over 100 yards receiving in the first quarter, had 180 some odd yards receiving for the game, didn't play the last half of the fourth quarter. We couldn't cover him. Whenever he was on Avonte Maddox was turned around the entire time.
He looked worse than Darby.
Oh,
He never played the ball. He didn't even he never played the ball. He always ran with the person, and he didn't put his hands up. Nothing. The one time he put his hands up, he got a flag.
And he played his back. Okay, so when his back was to the sideline, he wasn't even looking at the receiver. Like Devontae Adams saw that and just did hitches, he took advantage of that, and he used his aggressive and athletic ability that whenever he caught the ball, just get upfield. So if there was ever, and this is something I do want to talk about when we get towards the end, but if there was ever a game that showed that Howie Roseman needs to make a move for Jalen Ramsey, that was the game. If he does not attempt to make a move, if he doesn't offer I'm to the point where I'm offering 2 first-round picks because with the guarantee that we can talk to his agent to re-sign him. Because if we can re-sign him, you have a 24-year-old corner who's the best corner in football for the next 5 years. You get him up until he's at the age of 30. You do it. Because if you get him, think of the receivers that we have coming up. I know we're going to get into, think of Amari Cooper, Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, Josh Gordon. Just think of the receivers that the Philadelphia Eagles have to play over the next 7 to 8 weeks. You make the move, do what you have to do, because if you do not, you have one healthy cornerback that was on the team originally. That's Rasul Douglas, who, by the way, is the best cornerback on the team right now. But, Sidney Jones hamstring injury. Avonte Maddox, he got diagnosed with a concussion and I think like a neck thing. But I mean, it wouldn't shock me if Avonte played next week. I think he'll be able to. But Darby's out for a couple more weeks. Cravon's not coming back for a couple more weeks. Jalen's not coming back. Jalen Mills is not coming back for a couple more weeks. We talked about Avonte. They need to make a move. Craig James, yes, he has experience in the league with the Minnesota Vikings, but he's not a starter. You have to go out and get a starting caliber cornerback, and that is Jalen Mills. He should be an Eagle by Sunday. He should not play for Jacksonville against Denver. He should not see the field. He should be flying to Philly for a press conference and getting ready to play the New York Jets.
Yeah, it's hard to deny that. And then there's some people who are on Twitter today saying, what about Xavier Howard? Well, why would you go for him? If you're going to go for someone, you might as well go for Jalen Ramsey because the asking price is going to be the same damn thing. You're going to have to give up. Corner. Yeah. So do you want Xavier Howard, who's the best corner, on arguably a great corner, or do you want the best shutdown corner in the NFL with similar asking price from both teams? It's all you got to go with Jalen Ramsey. You got to whatever it takes. If you want to have a fighting chance for the rest of this year and in the playoffs, I think you have to do it. And if everyone comes back healthy and you can bring them all back, well then good. We'll have depth at the cornerback position for once. But I mean, we thought we had a whole bunch of depth with all the people. With all the guys that we had this year, and Crevon LeBlanc hasn't touched a field, Jalen Mills hasn't touched a field. Neither of them are able to touch a field until I think week 8,
week 6 or week 8. It's one week,
yeah, something like that. And then you got Darby, who's out for probably at least 3 more weeks. They said a month. Avonte Maddox might play, but I mean, you saw Avonte Maddox out there. He looked lost. He didn't look like he knew what he was doing.
I think he might be a better safety than a cornerback. And, that's good because we have 2 older safeties. So next year he could possibly be a starting safety, but he's not an outside. Look, he's an athletic kid, but he's not an outside corner. He's a slot corner or he's a safety. That's
after last night, I think it's quite clear that Sendejo and Cyprien may not necessarily be the help we want at safety, and moving Maddox there, bringing in Jalen Ramsey, moving Maddox
sucks. Sendejo's terrible.
He made some good plays though. I mean, he made some good plays, and I mean,
he hit his own teammate harder than he hit the other team.
He hit his own team, but it happens, man. It happens. It's fast pace.
He couldn't cover 80-year-old Jimmy Graham.
Well, no, but I mean, he is like what 6'5", and then you
6'7"
reach
apparently.
Apparently, but then you reach over your head and he's like 10 feet of iron.
I'm just saying, on the Jimmy Graham touchdown, he like did a very terrible double move, and Andrew Sendejo bit on it hard. Like it was an awful, like it was an out and up wheel route type of move by Jimmy Graham, and Andrew Sendejo like jittered 3 times. It was so bad.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not, the secondary isn't pretty. It's quite clear. It's kind of like the Phillies and their pitching situation. Our secondary has the potential
it's the bullpen
to go one of either way. It could go either way. It could go really well, or
Rasul Douglas is Hector Neris.
Fairly well. Yeah, well, yeah. If we want to break it into that, I mean, we could talk. It can be like the bullpen, or it can be like a starting pitching.
I'm gonna go with the bullpen because everybody's hurt.
I'm going with the starting pitching because we said, oh, look at all the potential. Look at all the potential.
Okay, who's the Aaron Nola of our corners then? Like, we don't
necessarily have one. Well, right now you'd have to call it Rasul Douglas. Call it for what it is.
That's not really saying much to me.
No, but we're also comparing apples to oranges, comparing cornerbacks to starting pitchers in baseball.
Whatever. Anyway, let's stop talking about the Phillies. That team screwed us over because now we have 3 road games coming up in 2 weeks. Yeah. Sorry. So let's quickly go over the scoring. The Packers jumped out to a 10-0 lead. Ross Tucker put out a tweet. He did the Eagles games here and locally on the preseason, and he's part of the Eagles pregame show on 94 WIP. He put out a tweet. He was like, after the Eagles made a comeback when they were down 10-0, he said, the Eagles would be scary good if they stopped spotting opponents 10 points. He's not lying on that. The Eagles have trailed by double digits in every game so far this year. They beat the Redskins, lost to the Falcons and the Lions, and beat the Packers yesterday. If this team can get out to a quicker start and not get down by double digits, they would be a really good team.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's what we preach it. Like every single week we've talked about, you have to start fast and you have to keep your foot on the gas. And it just last night went to show they kept their foot on the gas, but they started slow and it kept the game close. And, well, it kept us fans on the edge of our seats for the entirety of the game because we just didn't know what would happen. We had 2 goal line stands where we were successful, and that is rare from Jim Schwartz's defense. But kind of like the announcers were saying, you can only give so many yards when there's only 3 yards to go. So, that's why we're most successful when we have our backs against the wall, because you can't back up 10 yards and give the receivers all that space anymore. You can only give them 2 or 3 yards. And if you give them that, then they might get a touchdown. So you have no choice but to play right up on them and be physical.
Yeah, Vontae Maddox was better when they got inside the red zone because he wasn't playing so far off and you only have that limited amount of field. So, again, I mentioned how the Packers jumped out to a 10-0 lead after an Aaron Jones 3-yard run, and then a Mason Crosby 30-yard field goal. But after that, the Eagles got sparked by Miles Sanders on a 67-yard kickoff return, which set up the Eagles at the Packers 34-yard line, giving them great field position. And we got to see Alshon Jeffrey come back as he scored a touchdown. Alshon makes such a huge difference. He's not fast, but he's physical and he can catch the football. And you have to know where he is on the field, which opens up other parts of the field for, a Zach Ertz who won't get double teamed, for Nelson Aguilar, even though he had 1 target and caught the ball 0, didn't have any catches. The receivers for the Eagles only had, I think, a total of 5 catches for like 60 some odd yards, if I'm not mistaken. Like, Wentz used everybody. He used the running backs. Jordan Howard had a great game. We'll talk about him in a little bit. He used Ertz, who had 6 catches. He used everything. He didn't just focus in on one person. And this was probably the biggest win of Carson Wentz's career. Short week, on the road, against an undefeated team, staring 1-3 in the face. And he comes out. He didn't have his best numbers, but this was probably the best game definitely the best win that the Eagles played and the best overall game they've played since 2017 with Carson Wentz.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we definitely, there was a lot of miscues still, but they weren't, I mean, the penalties were there. We showed that we're still not a very disciplined team, although I think, if I'm not mistaken, probably over half of those penalties came on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was definitely a complete game. I mean, Nelson Aguilar was targeted once, which speaks volumes to the faith that Carson Wentz has in Aguilar and the waste of $9 million that Nelson Aguilar has been to this team. But it definitely was a complete game by Carson Wentz and his weapons. He was able to give the ball to his position players, and they were able to do stuff with it. Jordan Howard had an insane night. Miles Sanders had some really nice runs. I mean, did it help that the Green Bay Packers are one of the bottom 5 defenses against the run? Absolutely, but those are the types of stats that you have to take advantage of. If this team is that bad at something and you cannot exploit that weakness, the Packers exploited our bad passing defense. We exploited the bad run defense. If you can't exploit those weaknesses in a team, that's what happens when we get into the situation of the Falcons game and the Lions game. We were unable, miscues and not being able to truly attack the weaknesses became a downfall for us. And with the Packers, we attacked that run defense, and the run defense, we got chunk after chunk after. Sanders wasn't getting hit behind the line or for 1 or 2 yards. They were getting 5, 6, 12, 13-yard chunks every time. And that's huge to get that run game going and not have to have Carson Wentz thrown constantly during a game. Having him throw, he threw 27 times. Yeah. So having him throw 27 times versus having him throw 45. Like Rodgers, who threw 53 times, there's a lot higher success rate for your team if we're able to do it like that.
Yeah, the big guys up front had their best game of the year easily. Carson Wentz didn't get sacked. They opened up huge holes. Troy Aikman was talking about during the broadcast how he hadn't seen holes like that opened up in a long time. And that offensive line for the Eagles was downright dominant. Getting Dallas Goedert 100% back. I don't know if he was 100%, but he looked really good. You could see on some of the wham blocks, when they would motion him and then he would come back and just hit a defensive tackle and knock him on his ass. Like, that opened up the big holes for both Miles Sanders and Jordan Howard. Like, it was just an all-around great game plan by Doug Peterson and that coaching staff. Some more. The second quarter was wild. After the Alshon touchdown and then Mason Crosby kicked the field goal to make it 13-7, the Eagles were able to go down the field about 5.5 minutes later, and Dallas Goedert caught a touchdown and then did his own version of the Lambeau leap. And usually, when an opposing team member jumps and does a Lambeau leap at Lambeau Field, the Packer fans are pushing him back. But he jumped right into the arms of Eagles fans, and they held on to him. They weren't letting him go anywhere. The Eagles fans were amazing yesterday. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to get a ticket at Lambeau. There were a ton of Eagles fans there.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's always nice to see. You always looked in whenever they panned out to the crowd or you could see into the crowd, you always saw some of that midnight green, Eagles green. It wasn't all that bright Packer green. So that's always great to see. And just then to add to what you were saying about Goddard, the top 3 ranked players by PFF, the top 3 ranked Eagles, Carson Wentz, Zach Ertz, and Dallas Goedert. And that's that's crazy to think that your 2 tight ends and your quarterback rank as the top 3 players on Pro Football Focus.
So on the Packers, that is actually crazy. On the Packers' next possession, the Eagles got their one and only sack of the game as Derek Barnett was blocked by a tight end.
Reminiscent of the Super Bowl.
It was the opposite strip set, but I think it was Mercedes Lewis was trying to block Derek Barnett. He barely got a hand on him. Barnett was able to get around, knock the ball out of Rodgers' hands, and Brandon Graham scooped it up. And the Eagles were able to score right after that with Jordan Howard on a 1-yard touchdown run. And you think the Eagles, it's 21-13. They're going to go into the half up 8. And, of course, Aaron Rodgers takes about 50 seconds to go down the field, throws that touchdown, throws a couple passes in traffic to Geronimo Allison, one on 3rd and long. The Eagles defense yesterday was the ultimate bend but don't break by the Eagles defense. They didn't, they did great against the run, which they're one of the top rushing defenses in the league. If you took out Aaron Rodgers' excuse me, if you took out Aaron Rodgers' rushing numbers, I'm sorry, I should have looked this up before, but Aaron Rodgers had 46 yards rushing. You take out Aaron Rodgers' rushing numbers, the Packers have like 30 yards rushing. They did nothing on the ground. And again, that, case in point of the reason why they didn't run the ball down in the red zone. I still would have tried at least once to do it. You never know what could happen. Somebody goes, rushes upfield. They try to go after Aaron Rodgers. They leaves a void, and boom, you walk into the end zone. But you got to give it up to that Eagles defense. The secondary, the corners were dropping like flies. They were very undisciplined. Derek Barnett had a personal foul penalty. Zach Brown had 2, even though one of them was very, very weak. Personal foul penalties. Andrew Sendejo didn't have a great game. Like, you have to give Jim Schwartz and that defense credit for sticking with the game plan and not trying to do too much, which, in some cases could have caused them to lose the game.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the discipline definitely needs to be worked on. There were a couple weak calls like we discussed earlier, the whole that suplex or throw down by Zach Brown.
I've seen a lot worse that weren't called in the NFL.
Oh, absolutely. I know it's all about protecting players and all that, but I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, sometimes you have to pull, and when you're a guy the size of Zach Brown pulling a guy the size of Aaron Jones, well, those things are going to happen where you don't expect them to come off their feet, and they come off their feet and they get slammed down, or they give this perception that they've been slammed down. But no matter what, beyond that fact that this defense could have easily lost the game just as much as they were the reason we won the game based on their discipline. They have to be a bit more disciplined. They have to be very careful. The secondary, like you said, Avonte Maddox struggled. He had a penalty. He couldn't defend. The Derek Barnett had some bad ones. Zach Brown had some bad ones. I mean, we had 9 penalties for 93 yards versus the Packers 5 for 50 yards, which is huge. Like, to have to counteract 93 yards worth of penalties and turn it into a win is an accomplishment in its own for the Eagles. But as far as you take out like Aaron Rodgers rushing, let's just take out Aaron Rodgers' 2 big rushes where he was able to get like 14 and 12 yards, I believe. So you take out 26 yards and he's down to 20 yards, and there he suddenly barely got 50 yards of rushing. Like you said, Aaron Jones, 21 yards. Geronimo Allison had a 7-yard rush, and Danny Vital had 3 rushing yards. That was it. They had 31 rushing yards without Aaron Rodgers involved. And Aaron Rodgers, his rushes were only because he had to scramble because the pressure was there, which the offensive line pressure was incredible. I thought, like, Brandon Graham and Derek Barnett, that was probably their best game. And not only because of the sack. Even if they didn't get a sack, I think I would have called it their best game because they were in that backfield. They were wreaking havoc. They were causing havoc. Even Fletcher Cox was back there sometimes. And that's something we haven't seen at all through the first 3 games is Fletcher Cox getting some pressure back there. So, and this Green Bay Packers offensive line is not weak by any means. They're not great, but they're not weak by any stretch.
Their right tackle, I think it's their right tackle, Balaga, did get hurt, and I don't think he returned. So, It did, that helped, but you have to give the Eagles front 4 credit because yes, they didn't get the sacks, but they got continuous pressure. My only thing was on those runs that Aaron Rodgers had, there was nobody there. Like, that middle of the field was wide open for Aaron Rodgers to run, get the first downs and get as many yards as possible. So that was my only fear. And like, Aaron Rodgers is athletic, but he's not really known as a quarterback that wants to run. But like, you're going to go up against Dak Prescott in a couple weeks, Josh Allen in a couple weeks. There are quarterbacks that look to probably run more than they want to pass, especially Josh Allen, because that's what he likes to do. Josh Allen, a lot of people, draft him in fantasy because they're like, oh, he's going to get rushing yards. Yeah, because that's a running back playing quarterback pretty much. So that's something that they will have to shore up. But I think, as time goes on, they're going to figure it out. Fletcher Cox is going to get healthier. They're gonna get Timmy Jernigan back in maybe 4 or 5 weeks. So it's gonna help that they get the depth back. They start getting pressure, and hopefully that helps out the secondary. And it also helps if they get another name in the secondary because they have Rasul Douglas, Craig James is on the practice squad. Like, they don't have bodies right now. So they're definitely going to have to figure it out. But again, you have to give that defense credit. They made plays when they needed to make plays. And on a short week, we mentioned at the beginning, on the short week at Lambeau against Aaron Rodgers in that offense, yeah, they gave up a crap ton of yards, 422 yards passing to Aaron Rodgers, but they made the plays when they needed to make the plays, and that's why they were able to come away with the victory.
Oh yeah, definitely. They showed that they could stick with a game, unlike the past games where it felt like there was a few series where they came up flat, and those are the ones that we can look back on and call them the difference makers. In this game, they very rarely came up flat on offense. They got yardage. They put in the work on defense. They applied the pressure to the Packers. We did give up a ton of yards to Aaron Rodgers, but I mean, that was to be expected. We exploited their weak run defense. They exploited our weak passing defense. And that's just how it was. You knew there was going to be a give and take as far as that went. But the fact that we give up, like you said, 422 yards and we only got burned for 2 touchdowns, that's kind of impressive in its own. That's a ton of yardage, a ton of field covered by Aaron Rodgers. Look at the penalties too. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, like the types of yardage he got, courtesy of our secondary, go almost over 500 yards. So it's impressive that we were able to keep it all together and to have the type of game that we had on defense when you have basically 422 yards of passing and 80 yards worth of personal fouls on the defensive side of the ball, because that's a ton of yardage to give up and not end up giving up more points.
Yeah, it's a ton of lost yardage that a lot of people don't pay attention to. Let's move to the second half real quick. Jordan Howard really got going. He ran the ball with purpose, and I'm hoping that now, like, that Doug and Deuce Staley know how they want to use both Miles Sanders and Jordan Howard. You know, Howard could be that number one back, and he can tire down that defense. And then when you get to the fourth quarter or in the second half, you put the speed in. They are a true thunder and lightning. You know, Miles Sanders makes runs that we see why the Eagles drafted him. We saw why the Eagles drafted him yesterday. He'll make one cut and go, and he's got that speed burst. And Jordan Howard doesn't get tackled by the first guy. His touchdown in the fourth quarter, he got hit at the line of scrimmage, fell off the guy and just fell right into the end zone. Like, not many running backs are going to do that. A lot of running backs get stonewalled at the line of scrimmage. He doesn't. He keeps his legs moving, goes forward, falls into the end zone, and gets the Eagles that game-winning touchdown.
Yeah, his ability to break tackles and his ability to get yards after first contact is crazy. I mean, I can't remember the exact time, but there was at one point where he got hit, rolled off that, got hit a second time, and then kept going, ran through that tackle and kept going and ended up getting, I think he ended up with 7 or 8 yards, but that was the hardest fought 8 yards I've ever seen a running back get. And most running backs, that first contact, they take that first contact and that's it, or they struggle to get through the second bit of contact. But there was times where there was multiple hits on Howard and he just kept going. And it's exactly as you said it. They are thunder and lightning. Jordan Howard is the thunder, and Miles Sanders can be that lightning. If you pounded the ball with Howard, like there was times where you saw Howard pound the ball on 3 straight plays, and then they brought in Sanders, and then they went running with Sanders, and that just tires out the line. You have to chase. You have to be aware at all times of those guys and who's on the field.
So one thing I didn't like by Doug Peterson in the fourth quarter, you kind of brought up the recollection when you brought up that Howard ran like the same play 3 plays in a row. In the fourth quarter, up 34-27, they ran the same run when they had the ball at the 1 yard line. They ran the same play a good 4 or 5 times in a row. And Carson Wentz was under center a lot in the second half. I love that adjustment. Let Sanders get a running start from about 7 yards. It's easier, you know, you get a lot more force or you get a lot more momentum going forward than getting the ball from next to the quarterback and then having to make a move. I loved that adjustment. But then after they ran the ball that time and got close to midfield, they went back to 2 straight passing plays. Now the third down passing play was not Carson Wentz's best throw. It was probably his worst throw of the night because he had, I think it was Alshon open, and you hit Alshon, that's a first down. So that's one thing. Like, why did Doug stop doing what worked. Just keep running the ball. Keep rotating those running backs in. The Packers defense was tired down. We were the best offense that the Packers had faced all year. They faced the Bears, who I don't trust Mitchell Trubisky in that offense. Faced Minnesota. They have good receivers, but let's be real. It's Kirk Cousins. And then they faced Denver, and we don't even have to talk about that. Like, we're the best offense that they played, and our offensive line manhandled their defensive line. And, again, Carson Wentz's stats weren't gaudy. 16 of 27, 160 yards, but his 3 touchdowns, made plays when he needed to make plays, and they leaned on the running game. Jordan Howard had 87 yards rushing on 15 carries. Miles Sanders, 72 yards rushing on 11 carries. Also, the one thing that I like, they got the ball to Jordan Howard in the air. He had a 20-yard touchdown catch. Yeah, he had 3 catches for 28 yards, but we saw his ability of catching the ball out the backfield. There was not a defender close to him on that touchdown catch. The closest defender was 11 yards away. He just strolled his way into the end zone. We may have finally found the blueprint of how to use our running backs, and yesterday was a perfect example of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way the way that Kevin King and Jair Alexander were playing, there was no reason for Carson Wentz to continue to risk throwing the ball or to throw on multiple plays in a row. I mean, Alexander and King were playing incredible. They were playing out of their mind. The way that they were defending was great. I
really like Jair Alexander, by the way. I really like him.
I do, and I knew things about him, but I didn't really know a whole lot about King. And then I saw King, the way he was playing on Alshon Jeffrey, and that was impressive. And there was no reason to see Carson Wentz throw the ball. I believe that we could have thrown the ball even less than 27 times. We could have ran the ball more. We ran the ball 33 times. We probably could have ran it close to 40 times, and you would have gotten similar yardage. I don't think there was any reason to have Carson Wentz throw the ball even the amount he did. And, I mean, you can look back at this game, people could laugh at Carson Wentz or judge it, but because it's only 160 yards, but he was effective. He was effective when he had to be. He got the 3 passing touchdowns. He got 160 yards on 16 completions, and then the rushing job was taken over by everybody else.
So the game plan against the Packers was reminiscent of 2017. After they lost to the Chiefs and LeGarrette Blount got 0 carries, and yes, he didn't come out and talk negative about the game plan, but he obviously mentioned, look, we could probably run the ball more. Zach Ertz mentioned that. The offensive line mentioned that. The next week against they played the Giants the next week, and then the week 4 that year they played the LA Chargers in LA. And if you remember that game, LeGarrette Blount went off. This was reminiscent of that because they got the ball to Jordan Howard early. They got the ball to him often. He only had 15 carries, but he had 18 touches, 115 total yards, 3 touchdowns. Like, he took advantage of those touches, and Doug Peterson didn't shy away from the running game. Also, it helps when the Packers gave up 100 coming into the game, gave up 130 yards on the ground, and Eagles were able to get about $180. Like, that helps. And you don't have – this was a game where Carson Wentz didn't have to win it. I mentioned in our preview show, like, this would have to be a Carson Wentz game. It didn't need to be a Carson Wentz game. It was an offensive line game. That offensive line dominated the entire night.
Oh, definitely. They were always opening up holes, and they were doing an incredible job. Yeah, I mean, it was all around a really solid effort. It was probably the best game yet by the offensive line.
Easily the best game.
Hopefully we see more of that, because I think there's a bit more of a challenge coming up, because the Jets will have Quinnen Williams and CJ Mosley back, or more than likely we'll have them back, so it makes for a bit of a tougher sledding day as far as the Russian game goes. But there's no reason that if our offensive line plays that way that we can't do what we did with the Packers to the Jets as well. From a Russian standpoint, if our offensive line can continue to stay that way, keep the pressure off of Carson Wentz, and open up big holes when they need to for the Russian attack, this season could turn around quickly.
It's very true, because they're 2-2 now. You get the Jets and you win that, you're 3-2. Dallas has the Saints, a game they could potentially lose, and then the week after they host the Packers, another game they could potentially lose. We could be heading to week 6 with the Eagles and Cowboys tied. Like, I'm not saying it's going to happen, because Dallas probably won't lose both games, but there is that potential that that outlook of this season is totally different after beating the Packers. It is totally
massively
different.
Looking at 1 and 3 and saying, oh, we have the Packers or the Jets next, and then looking at 2 and 2 and saying we have the Jets next, and looking at what the Cowboys have. Then now you're sitting there and you're like, there's optimism at 2 and 2. At 1 and 3, that's a big hole to climb out of. And everyone who was sitting there saying we're going to be 12 and 4 and 13 and 3, I don't believe that to be true either. That we get to that point. I think we have a tough schedule, and I don't think it bodes well for a 12 and 4 or only losing one more game or two more games. But this definitely increases our chances for making a good run and keeping things competitive with the Dallas Cowboys.
So I want to get to the latter parts of the fourth quarter when the Eagles shut down the Packers offense when they got down to the red zone. First, Rodney McLeod had one hell of a game. He was able to strip the ball out, not strip, but at least negate Jimmy Graham from catching the ball on fourth down in the back of the end zone. And then before that play, on I think it was second down, Rodgers did like sort of a read option, and he went out to the left. Rodney McLeod was in his face because he had a lot of – if Rodney McLeod's not there, Aaron Rodgers is walking into the end zone, forcing the throwaway. That was, two great plays by Rodney McLeod. And not enough gets talked about Rodney McLeod. He's coming off of an ACL injury. He's maybe missed 3 plays the entire game or the entire season. He's on the field all the time. He played every snap yesterday, and he is just a really good safety and a really good complement to Malcolm Jenkins.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at this point, I'm not saying Jenkins is doing bad, but Malcolm Jenkins isn't looking like his usual Malcolm Jenkins self.
I think that's because they have him playing all over the place.
Yeah, exactly. But, at the same time, they had him playing all over the place last year, and look at the way he played. But having Rodney McLeod back, I think, takes a ton of pressure off of Jenkins, and maybe Jenkins is getting uncomfortable because they're making him move into some linebacker role, then safety, linebacker, cornerback, moving him around more, and he knows he has McLeod back there. But, McLeod led the team in tackles, and like you said, like the pass defended, the tackles, the way that he's been playing, it's unreal. He is huge to have back in the lineup.
Think about this. What was I going to say? Oh, well, after the injuries to Avante and Sidney, the Eagles had Rasul Douglas, Craig James, Malcolm Jenkins, Rodney McLeod, Jonathan Cyprien, and Andrew Sendejo, some type of combination on the field. Like that, did you ever think you would see the 4 safeties on the field for the Eagles? Like, that's how bad it got yesterday.
Well, thank God we kept all those safeties at the end of the day, because apparently our cornerback room is going through crisis. Last year we had to start 13 different cornerbacks, and we are well on our way to a similar direction this year. It's unreal. I just can't understand it. I can't comprehend it. But, I get it. Injuries do happen. But, this is big. These are big years for some of these people. Sidney Jones, this is a big year. You got to prove yourself. You got to prove it. You were a potential first-round talent who fell out because of issues with a knee. And so far he has proven nothing but issues with every part of his leg since he started playing for the Eagles. So, this is like, you have to prove it. Like we say with Derek Barnett, this was a prove a year. I think Barnett's playing really well. I think he is proving it. But Sidney Jones has not really proven it. Yeah, he's had some good games. He's had some good moments, but there's just as much hindrance on his breakout as there is the actual breakout.
Yeah, he needs to stay healthy. And Shane brought up a point when we were watching the game yesterday. He's like, I wonder what type of talent or what type of ability Sidney Jones would have if he never tore his Achilles during his pro day. Like, Kevin King and Sidney Jones shared the same, defensive backfield at Washington. And King got drafted before him, but that was only because Sidney Jones tore his Achilles. Like, we see the talent that Kevin King has when we watch the Packers play. Like, that should be Sidney Jones, but who knows if that injury has any effect. That last play, obviously you're talking about Green Bay Twitter going insane, saying that they should have at least reviewed There should have been at least a booth review on a potential pass interference. Oh, and by the way, do you think if the Packers would have scored, do you think they were going for 2, or do you think they kicked the field goal to send the game to OT?
I think based on the way the game was going, you take that 1 point and you take that luck to overtime. The way the Packers were playing,
they were going for 2.
The way the Packers were playing on offense and stuff, I take my chances and go to overtime against that Eagles secondary with like at that point where you know that the secondary is Rasul Douglas and a guy who's no more than a practice squad guy.
That's why they go for 2. Look, I'm telling you, the way
it goes. I guess it can go either way, but they could have. That goes to overtime, I think they score right away.
I don't know. Can I tell you? Goal. I don't know, because I can tell you something. They couldn't stop the Eagles' offense. Eagles get the ball, they go down and score. Like, they go for 2. 100% they go for 2, I think, because you have Aaron Rodgers. You're going to be at the 2-yard line. You have a practice squad cornerback out there. That's where he would go. Like, I will never know. And obviously that's a question that Matt LaFleur will never answer because the situation didn't come about. But I'm 100% sure that they would have went for 2, go for the win. And granted, it would have left the Eagles, 30, 40 seconds left. Maybe they can get into field goal range. But we've seen how the Eagles, the last 2 weeks, with going down the field trying to get into scoring range, they haven't been able to do it. So I still think that the Packers would have went for 2. All right, so your player or players of the game and your play of the game. What are they?
Oh, man. My player of the game, I think I'm going to go Jordan Howard.
Okay.
I think that like the output of having 3 touchdowns, 15 carries for 87 yards, also getting involved in the passing game, targeted 4 times, 3 receptions, 28 yards and a touchdown. I think it's got to be Jordan Howard in this situation. He proved to Dougie P why you play me. This is why you play me. This is why you brought me in. So feed me that ball more. Play of the game, probably the strip sack. Got to be the strip sack. So reminiscent of the Super Bowl. It just made me happy. I was like, oh man, it feels like the Super Bowl all over again. And it was one point in the game where it was a really big turning point. The momentum was swinging in our direction. Then we go out there, we get that humongous stop that we needed, and that could be the difference maker in what could have been overtime. That drive at the end of the game being for the Packers going for a field goal in the win.
I'm going to go with the offensive line because A, Carson Wentz barely got touched, and B, opened up huge holes for both Miles Sanders and Jordan Howard. That offensive line was dominant. We mentioned it before, is their best game of the year. And that's the type of,
Well, now I got to ask the question. You say the offensive line as a whole. I get it. It's a unit. Yeah. But now tell me who was the best. The player of the game. You picked a unit of the game. Give me your player.
The offensive line is a player.
Oh, well, you gotta know of someone.
All right, I'll go Jason Kelce.
Jason Kelce?
Yeah.
It is tough to choose. I mean, you could pick anyone, and you could pick any play or any.
I should go with Jason Peters. He played every play, and Peters and Johnson did not let Wentz get touched by Zadarius Smith or Preston Smith. Like Zadarius and Preston Smith had next to zero impact on the game for the Eagles passing game. And my play of the game, I'm going with the Miles Sanders 67-yard kickoff return that set up the Eagles at the Packers 34-yard line. That brought life into the Eagles sideline, to the Eagles offense, and to Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders could have had his head held down after last week's 2 fumbles. He came back with a vengeance, and that play sparked the team. They scored a touchdown. That drive, they were able to get the lead. They had a halftime lead. He had a big game. He was able to get some big runs. So I'm going to go with the 67-yard kickoff return for a touchdown by.
Which is fair. That was a humongous momentum shifter for us. It's like a whole different team was switched on with that return. I mean, there was a couple moments where like the momentum really, you started to think, holy crap, here come the Packers. And then there was a humongous momentum shifting moment for the Eagles. And those types of momentum shifting moments in games have not been present. They weren't there in the Redskins game. We kind of just discounted the Redskins, said, we got this. we kind of discounted the Lions. We said they're better than the Redskins, but we can beat them. So we kind of discounted them. And then the Falcons, we just never could get those momentum shifting plays. And they were humongous in this game. I think they were definitely the difference between the Packers winning this game and us winning the game. Is those there was 3 or 4 key plays that really shifted everything.
Yep. All right. So before we finish off, there was a stat on Twitter by Jason Ashworth, which I thought was interesting. Dating back to 2000, here are the Eagles' season records when heading into Week 4 at 1-2, and it's been 7 times. So when they lost the games at 1-3, these are the records that they finished with. In 2007, they finished 8-8. 2011, they finished 8-8. 2013, 10-6. 2015, 7-9. Now when they won the game, they go to 2-2. In 2000, they went 11-5 that year. In 2003, which we all remember what happened, they made the NFC Championship game that year. They finished 12-4. There is no other way to look at it that win against the Packers last night was humongous. We mentioned it on the outset, and we'll mention it here as we finish off. 2-2 is a hell of a lot better than 1-3.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I guess if we're sharing exciting facts, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I saw the fact, I can't full on remember the record, but prior to last night's game, Aaron Rodgers with a 10-point lead. Yep, 58-0-1. That we delivered his first loss. Like that's historic. Aaron Rodgers is going down in NFL history, and some of those records that he could have taken and laid claim to that probably no one else will ever touch. One of them was erased last night with that 58-0-1. I mean, the record is still extremely impressive, but to be that one that says we were that one, that's impressive.
Yeah, it was just an all-around team effort yesterday. The offense they looked almost the best they've looked all year. The defense was massively bend but don't break, and they get all the credit in the world because they needed to win that game. We said it all week that they needed to find a way to win the game. Doug Peterson is now the Eagles are 5-0 under Doug Peterson on Thursday night games. That includes the Week 1 opener against Atlanta last year. But they've beaten the Giants twice. Once at home, I believe, and once at the Meadowlands. They beat Carolina on the road, and they just beat the Packers on the road. This team is for some reason, there's no logic behind the reasoning. This team plays a lot better when their backs are against the wall. Mm-hmm. And hopefully now, as they start to get healthier, hopefully, and they go forward in the schedule, they can get out to quick starts so that they don't always have to make these comebacks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm not saying we're taking on the underdog persona again of the Super Bowl 2017. I know that they are, but we're not underdogs. Let's just face it. We aren't even living up to the expectations. Despite this win, we are still not living up to the expectations we were given. But that was the most 2017-esque game of football by the Eagles this year and last year. And I would love to see more games like that. It had my heart pounding all night, but those are the games that make you fall in love with being a Philadelphia Eagles fan.
Yes, and now we get 10 days to
move into my new house.
To relish this victory. Sunday's going to be a fun red zone day. You don't have to worry about sitting here panicking or getting anxious over the Eagles game. So we get to watch Red Zone all day Sunday as the Philadelphia Eagles defeat the Green Bay Packers 34-27. Their next game is against the New York Jets. So Connor and I will be back sometime next week with a preview of the New York Jets. Sam Darnold should be back. They have Le'Veon Bell, Robbie Anderson, Jamison Crowder, C.J. Mosley, Quinnen Williams, Jamal Adams. They have names, but Adam Gase is their coach somehow, or somehow he got another coaching job. It should be a game that the Eagles can come away with the victory, but we will get down and dirty with that. We also before we get off, we do have a People's Take next week sometime because of Hell in a Cell, which is taking place. Also, Friday Night SmackDown starts up, so we have a lot to hopefully we have the time because I know you're moving, Connor. So good luck with that, by the way.
Just as once they hook the internet up, I'll take a break to do a podcast in a heartbeat, man. Moving in and out of houses is not gonna be fun.
No, moving sucks. Moving is the worst. All right. So you can always reach out to the Always Next Year podcast Twitter at ANY Podcast. If you have any suggestions, if you anybody that you might want to hear come on our show, we're doing our best to get some guests on our show. So we don't have any definites yet, but we will hopefully within the next week or two, couple weeks, have a guest on for a segment to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. You can follow Connor at Connor10, that's Connor TEN, and follow me at LJ Harrell 54. Philadelphia Eagles are now 2-2 and sitting a lot better than we were feeling after Sunday's game against the Detroit Lions. For Connor, I'm LJ. Thank you for listening to the Kelly Green Hour here on the Always Next Year podcast.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such eager my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still happy life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.